Plutus menaces the poets, but once more Virgil shows himself more powerful than the rages of hell's monsters. The poets enter the fourth circle and find what seems to be a war in progress. The sinners are divided into two raging mobs, each soul among them straining madly at a great boulder-like weight. The two mobs meet, crushing their weights against one another, after which they separate, pushing the great weights apart, beginning over again. One mob is made up of the Horders, the other of the Wasters. In life, they lacked all moderation in regulating their expenses. They destroyed the light of God within by thinking of nothing but money. Thus, in death, their souls are encumbered by dead weights, and one excess serves to punish the other. Their souls, moreover, have become so dimmed and awry in their fruitless rages, there is no hope of recognizing any among them. The poets pass on while Virgil explains the function of Dame Fortune in the divine scheme. As he finishes, it is past midnight on Good Friday now, they reach the inner edge of the ledge and come to a black spring which bubbles murkily over the rocks to form the Marsh of Styx, which is the fifth circle, the last station of Upper Hell. Across the marsh, they see the countless souls attacking one another in the foul slime. These are the Wrathful, and the symbolism of their punishment is obvious. Virgil also points out to Dante certain bubbles rising from the slime, and informs him that below the mud lie entombed the souls of the sullen. In life, they refuse to welcome the sweet light of the sun, and in death, they are buried forever below in the stinking waters of the Styx, gargling the words of an endless chant in a grotesque parody of singing a hymn. Papa Satan, Alepi. Plutus ducked and stuttered in his rage, and my all-knowing guide, to comfort me, "Don't be startled, for no power of his, however he may lord it over the damned, may hinder your descent through this abyss." And turning to that carnival of bloat, cried, "Peace, you wolf of hell! Choke back your bile, and let its venom blister your own throat. Our passage through this pit is willed on high by that same throne that loosed the angel wrath on Michael, on ambition and mutiny." As puffed-out sails fall, when the mast gives way and flutter to a self-convulsing heap, so collapsed Plutus into that dead clay. Thus, we descended into that dark scarp of hell to which all the evil of the universe comes home at last, into the fourth great circle and ledge of the abyss. O holy justice, who could relate the agonies I saw? What guilt is man that he can come to this? Just as the surge Charybdis hurls to sea, crashes and breaks upon its counter-surge, so these shades dance and crash eternally. Here, too, I saw a nation of lost souls, far more than were above. They strained their chests against enormous weights, and with mad howls rolled them at one another. Then in haste they rolled them back, one party shouting out, "Why do you hoard?" and the other, "Why do you waste?" So back around that ring they puff and blow, each faction to its course, until they reach opposite sides. And screaming as they go, the madmen turn and start their weights again to crash against the maniacs. And I, watching, felt my heart contract with pain. "Master," I said, "what people can these be? And all these tonsured ones, there on our left, is it possible they were all of the clergy?" And he, "In the first light beneath the sun, they were so skewed and squintered in their minds, their misering or extravagance mocked all reason. The voice of each clamors, its own excess, where lust meets lust at the 2 points of the circle, where opposite guilts meet in their wretchedness. These tonsured wraiths of greed were priests indeed, and popes and cardinals, for it is these the weeds of avarice sows its rankest seed. And I to him, Master, among this crew, surely I should be able to make out one fallen image of some soul I knew. And he to me, this is a lost ambition. In their sordid lives they labored to be blind, and now their souls have dimmed past recognition. All their eternity is to butt and bray. One crew will stand tight-fisted, the other stripped of its very hair at the bar of Judgment Day. Hoarding and squandering wasted all their light and brought them screaming to this brawl of wraiths. You need no words of mine to grasp their plight. Now you may see the fleeting vanity of the goods of fortune, for which men tear down all that they are, to build a mockery. Not all the gold that is or ever was under the sky could buy for one of these exhausted souls the fraction of a pause. Master, I said, tell me, now that you touch on this Dame Fortune, what is she? That she holds all the good things of the world within her clutch? And he to me, O credulous mankind, is there one error that has wooed and lost you? Now listen, and strike error from your mind. That king whose perfect wisdom transcends all, made the heavens and posted angels on them to guide the eternal light, that it might fall from every sphere to every sphere the same. He made earth's splendors by like a decree, and posted as their minister this high dame, the lady of permutations. All earth's gear she changes from nation to nation, from house to house in changeless change through every turning year. No mortal power may stay her spinning wheel. The nations rise and fall by her decree. None may foresee where she will set her heel. She passes, and things pass. Man's mortal reason cannot encompass her. She rules her sphere as other gods rule theirs. Season by season, her changes change her changes endlessly, and whose turn has come, press on her so. She must be swift by hard necessity. And this is she so railed at and reviled, that even her debtors, in the joys of time, blaspheme her name. Their oaths are bitter and wild, but she in her beatitude does not hear. Among the primal beings of God's joy, she breathes her blessedness and wheels her sphere. But the stars that marked our starting fall away. We must go deeper into greater pain, for it is not permitted that we stay here. And crossing over to the chasm's edge, we came to a spring that boiled and overflowed through a great crevice worn into the ledge. By that foul water, black from its very source, we found a nightmare path among the rocks and followed the dark stream along its course. Beyond its rocky race and wild descent, the river floods and forms a marsh called STYX, a dreary swampland, vaporous and malignant. And I, intent on all of our passage touched, made out a swarm of spirits in that bog, savage with anger, naked, slime besmooched. They thumped at one another in that slime with hands and feet, and they butted, and they bit, as if each other would tear the other limb from limb. And my kind sage, my son, behold the souls of those who lived in wrath. And do you see the broken surfaces of those water holes on every hand, boiling as if in pain? There are souls beneath that water, fixed in slime. They speak their peace, end it, and start again. Sullen were we in the air made sweet by the sun, in the glory of his shining our hearts poured a bitter smoke. Sullen were we begun, sullen we lie forever in this ditch. This litany they gargle in their throats as if they sang, but lacked the words and pitch. Then circling on that filthy wallow, we picked our way between the bank and fen, keeping our eyes on those foul souls that swallow the slime of hell. And so, at last we came to the foot of a great tower that has no name. The poets stand at the edge of the swamp, and a mysterious signal flames from the great tower. It is answered from the darkness of the other side, and almost immediately the poets see Phlegyas, the boatman of STYX, racing towards them across the water, fast as a flying arrow. He comes avidly, thinking to find new souls for torment, and he howls with rage when he discovers the poets. Once again, however, Virgil conquers wrath with a word, and Phlegyas reluctantly gives them passage. As they are crossing, a muddy soul rises before them. It is Filippo Argenti, one of the Wrathful. Dante recognizes him despite the filth with which he is covered, and he berates him soundly, even wishing to see him tormented further. Virgil approves Dante's disdain, and, as if in an answer to Dante's wrath, Argenti is suddenly set upon by all the other sinners present, who fall upon him and rip him to pieces. The boat, meanwhile, has sped on, and before Argenti's screams have died away, Dante sees the flaming red towers of Dis, the capital of hell. The great walls of the Iron City block the way to the lower hell. Properly speaking, all the rest of hell lies within the city walls, which separate the upper and the lower hell. Phlegyas deposits them at a great iron gate, which they find to be guarded by the rebellious angels. These creatures of ultimate evil, rebels against God himself, refuse to let the poets pass. Even Virgil is powerless against them, for human reason by itself cannot cope with the essence of evil. Only divine aid can bring hope. Virgil accordingly sends up a prayer for assistance and waits anxiously for a heavenly messenger to appear. Returning to my theme, I say we came to the foot of a great tower, but long before we reached it through the marsh, two horns of flame flared from the summit, one from either side, and then far off. So far we scarce could see it across the mist. Another flame replied. I turned to that sea of all intelligence, saying, "Master, what is this signal and counter-signal? Who is it speaks with fire across this distance?" And he then, "Look across this filthy slough. You may already see the one they summon, if the swamp vapors do not hide him from you." No twanging bowspring ever shot an arrow that bored the air it rode dead to the mark more swiftly than the flying skiff whose prow shot towards us over the polluted channel, with a single steersman at the helm who called, "So, do I have you at last, you whelp of hell?" "Phlegyas, Phlegyas," said my lord and guide, "this time you waste your breath. You have us only for the time it takes to cross to the other side." Phlegyas, the madman, blew his rage among those muddy marshes like a cheat deceived, or like a fool at some imagined wrong. My guide, whom all the fiend's noise could not nettle, boarded the skiff, motioning me to follow, and not till I stepped aboard it did it seem to settle into the water. At once we left the shore, that ancient hull riding more heavily than it had ridden in all of time before. And as we ran on that dead swamp, the slime rose before me, and from it a voice cried, "Who are you that come here before your time?" And I replied, "If I come, I do not remain. But you, who are you, so fallen and so foul?" And he, "I am the one who weeps." And I then, "May you weep and wail to all eternity, for I know you, hell dog, as filthy as you are." Then he stretched both hands onto the boat, but warily my master shoved him back, crying, "Down! Down with the other dogs!" Then he embraced me, saying, "Indigent spirit, I kiss you as you frown. Blessed be she who bore you. In world and time, this one was haughtier yet. Not one unbending graces his memory. Here is his shadow in slime. How many living now, chancellors of wrath, shall come to lie here in this pig-mire, leaving a curse to be their aftermath?" And I, "Master, it would suit my whim to see this wretch scrubbed down into the swill before we leave this stinking sink and him." And he to me, "Before the other side shows through the mist, you shall have all you ask. This is a wish that should be gratified." And shortly after, I saw the loathsome spirit, so mangled by a swarm of bloody wraiths. To this day, I praise and thank God for it. "After Filippo Argenti!" they all cried together. The mad dog Florentine wheeled at their cry and bit himself for rage. I saw them gather. And there we left him, and I say no more. But such a wailing beat upon my ears, I strained my eyes ahead to the far shore. "My son," the master said, "the city called Dis lies just ahead. The heavy citizens, the swarming crowds of hell's metropolis." And I then, "Master, I already see the glow of its red mosques, as if they came hot from the forge to smolder in this valley." And my all-knowing guide, "They are eternal flukes to eternal fire that rages in them and makes them glow across this lower hell." And he spoke as we entered the vast moat of the sepulchre. Its walls seemed made of iron and towered above us in our little boat. We circled through what seemed an endless distance before the boatman ran his prow ashore, crying, "Get out! Get out! This is the entrance." Above the gates, more than 1,000 shades of spirits purged from heaven for its glory cried angrily, "Who is that invades death's kingdom in his life?" My lord and guide advanced a step before me, with a sign that he wished to speak with some of them aside. They quieted somewhat, and one called, "Come, but come alone, and tell that other one who thought to walk so blithely through death's kingdom, he may go back by the same fool's way he came by. Let him try his living luck. You, who are dead, can come only to stay." Reader, judge for yourself how each black word fell on my ears to sink into my heart. I lost hope of returning to the world. Oh, my beloved master, my guide in peril, who time and time again have seen me safely along this way and turned the power of evil, stand by me now, I cried. In my heart's fright, and if the dead forbid our journey to them, let us go back towards the light together. My guide then, in the greatness of his spirit, "Take heart. Nothing can take our passage from us when such a power has given warrant for it. Wait here and feed your soul while I am gone on comfort and good hope. I will not leave you to wander in this underworld alone. So the sweet guide and father leaves me here, and I stay on in doubt with yes and no dividing my heart to hope and fear. I could not hear my Lord's words, but the pack that gathered round him suddenly broke away, howling and jostling, and went pouring back, slamming the towering gate hard in his face. That great soul stood alone outside the wall. Then he came back. His pain showed in his pace. His eyes were fixed upon the ground. His brow had sagged from its assurance. He sighed out loud. Who has forbidden me the halls of sorrow? And to me he said, You need not be cast down by my vexation, for whatever plot these fiends may lay against us, we will go on. This insolence of theirs is nothing new. They showed it once at a less secret gate that still stands open for all that they could do. The same gate where you read the dead inscription. And through it at this moment, a great one comes. Already he has passed it and moves down ledge by dark ledge. He is one who needs no guide, and at his touch, all gates must spring aside. At the gate of Dis, the poets wait in dread. Virgil tries to hide his anxiety from Dante, but both realize that without divine aid they will surely be lost. To add to their terrors, 3 infernal furies, symbols of eternal remorse, appear on a nearby tower, from which they threaten the poets and call for Medusa to come and change them to stone. Virgil at once commands Dante to turn and shut his eyes. To make doubly sure, Virgil himself places his hands over Dante's eyes, for there is an evil upon which man must not look if he is to be saved. But at the moment of greatest anxiety, a storm shakes the dirty air of hell, and the sinners in the marsh begin to scatter like frightened frogs. The heavenly messenger is approaching. He appears walking majestically through hell, looking neither to right nor left. With a touch, he throws open the gate of Dis, while his words scatter the rebellious angels. Then he returns as he came. The poets now enter the gate unopposed and find themselves in the 6th circle. Here they find a countryside like a vast cemetery. Tombs of every size stretch out before them, each with its lid lying beside it, and each wrapped in flames. Cries of anguish sound endlessly from the entombed dead. This is the torment of the heretics of every cult. By heretic, Dante means specifically those who did violence to God by denying immortality. Since they taught that the soul dies with the body, so their punishment is an eternal grave in the fiery morgue of God's wrath. My face had paled to a mask of cowardice when I saw my guide turn back. The sight of it the sooner brought the color back to his. He stood apart like one who strains to hear what he cannot see, for the eye could not reach far across the vapors of that midnight air. Yet surely we were meant to pass these tombs, he said aloud. If not, so much was promised. Oh, how time hangs and drags till our aid comes. I saw too well how the words with which he ended covered his start, and perhaps I drew a worse conclusion from that than he intended. Tell me, master, does anyone ever come from the first ledge, whose only punishment is hope cut off, into this dreary bottom? I put this question to him, still in fear of what his broken speech might mean, and he, Rarely do any of us enter here. Once before, it is true, I crossed through hell conjured by cruel Erichtho, who recalled the spirits to their bodies. Her dark spell forced me, newly stripped of my mortal part, to enter through this gate and summon out a spirit from Judacia. Take heart. This is the last depth and the darkest lair and the farthest from heaven which encircles all. And at that time I came back, even from there. The marsh from which the stinking gases bubble lie all about this capital of sorrow, whose gates we may not pass now without trouble. All this and more he expounded, but the rest was lost on me, for suddenly my attention was drawn to the turret with the fiery crest, where all at once 3 hellish and inhuman furies sprang to view, blood-stained and wild. Their limbs and gestures hinted they were women. Belts of greenest hydras wound and wound around their waists, and makes and horned serpents grew from their head like matted hair and bound their horrid brows. My master, who well knew the handmaids of the Queen of Woe, cried, "Look, the terrible Irenaeus of Hecate's crew! That is Megara, to the left of the tower. Electo is the one that raves on the right. Tisiphone stands between." And he said no more. With their palms they beat their brows, with their nails they clawed their bleeding breasts, and such mad wails broke from them that I drew dose to the poet, overawed, and altogether screamed, looking down at me, "Call Medusa, that we may change him to stone! Too lightly we let Theseus go free. Turn your back and keep your eyes shut tight. For should the Gorgon come and you look at her, never again would you return to the light." This was my guide's command, and he turned me about himself, and would not trust my hands alone, but, with his placed on mine, held my eyes shut. Men of sound intellect and probity weigh with good understanding what lies between the veil of my strange allegory. Suddenly, there broke on the dirty swell of the dark marsh a squall of terrible sound that sent a tremor through both shores of hell. A sound as if 2 continents of air, one frigid and one scorching, clashed head-on in a war of winds that stripped the forests bare, ripped off whole boughs and blew them helter-skelter along the range of dust it raised, before making the beasts and shepherds run for shelter. The master freed my eyes. "Now turn," he said, "and fix your nerve of vision on the foam there where the smoke is the thickest and the most acrid." As frogs before the snake that hunts them down churn up the pond in flight until the last squats on the bottom as if turned to stone, so I saw more than 1,000 ruined souls scatter away from one who crossed dry-shod the Stygian marsh into hell's burning bowels. With his left hand he fanned away the dreary vapors of that sink as he approached, and only of that annoyance did he seem wary. Clearly he was a messenger from God's throne, and I turned to my guide, but he made a sign that I should keep my silence and bow down. Ah, what scorn breathed from that angel presence! He reached the gate of Dis, and with a wand he waved it open, for there was no resistance. "Outcasts of heaven, you twice loathsome crew," he cried upon that terrible sill of hell, "how does this insolence still live in you? Why do you set yourselves against that throne whose will none can deny, and which, times past, has added to your pain for each rebellion? Why do you butt against fate's ordinance? Your Cerberus, if you recall, still wears his throat and chin peeled for such arrogance." Then he turned back through the same filthy tide by which he had come. He did not speak to us, but went on his way like one preoccupied by other presences than those before him. And we moved towards the city, fearing nothing after his holy words. Straight through the dim and open gate, we entered unopposed. And I, eager to learn what new estate of hell those burning fortress walls enclosed, began to look about the very moment we were inside, and I saw on every hand a countryside of sorrow and new torment. As at Arles, where the Rhone sinks into stagnant marshes, as at Pola by the Quarnaro Gulf, whose waters close Italy and wash her farthest reaches, the uneven tombs cover the even plain such fields I saw there, spread in all directions, except that here the tombs were chests of pain, for in a ring around each tomb, great fires raised every wall to a red heat. No smith works hotter iron in his forge. The biers stood with their lids upraised, and from their pits an anguish moaning rose on the dead air from the desolation of tormented spirits. And I, Master, what shades are these who lie buried in these chests and fill the air with such a painful and unending cry? These are the arch heretics of all cults, with all their followers, he replied. Far more than you would think lies stuffed into these vaults. Like lies with like in every heresy, and the monuments are fired, some more, some less, to each depravity its own degree. He turned then, and I followed through that night between the wall and the torments, bearing right. As the poets pass on, one of the damned hears Dante speaking, recognizes him as a Tuscan, and calls to him from one of the fiery tombs. A moment later, he appears. He is Farinata degli Uberti, a great war chief of the Tuscans. The majesty and power of his bearing seem to diminish hell itself. He asks Dante's lineage and recognizes him as an enemy. They begin to talk politics, but are interrupted by another shade, who rises from the same tomb. This one is Cavalcante di Cavalcante, father of Guido Cavalcante, a contemporary poet. If it is genius that leads Dante on his great journey, the shade asks, why is Guido not with him? Can Dante presume to a greater genius than Guido's? Dante replies that he comes this way only with the aid of powers Guido has not sought. His reply is a classic example of many leveled symbolism, as well as an overt criticism of a rival poet. The senior Cavalcante mistakenly infers from Dante's reply that Guido is dead, and swoons back into the flames. Farinata, who is not designed to notice his fellow sinner, continues from the exact point at which he had been interrupted. It is as if he refuses to recognize the flames in which he is shrouded. He proceeds to prophesy Dante's banishment from Florence. He defends his part in Florentine politics, and then, in answer to Dante's question, he explains how it is that the damned can foresee the future but have no knowledge of the present. He then names others who share his tomb, and Dante takes his leave with considerable respect for his great enemy, pausing only long enough to leave word for Cavalcante that Guido is still alive. We go by a secret path along the rim of the dark city, between the wall and the torments. My master leads me, and I follow him. Supreme virtue, who through this impious land wheel me at will down these dark gyres? I said. Speak for me, for I wish to understand. Tell me, master, is it permitted to see the souls within these tombs? The lids are raised, and no one stands on guard. And he to me, all shall be sealed forever on the day these souls return here from Jehoshaphat with the bodies they have given once to clay. In this dark corner of the morgue of wrath lie Epicurus and his followers, who make the soul share in the body's death. And here you shall be granted presently not only your spoken wish, but that other as well, which you thought perhaps to hide from me. And I, except to speak my thoughts in a few and modest words, as I learned from your example, dear guide, I do not hide my heart from you. O Tuscan, who go living through this place speaking so decorously, may it please you to pause a moment on your way, for by the grace of that high speech in which I hear your birth, I know you for a son of that noble city which perhaps I vexed too much in my time on earth. These words broke without warning from inside one of the burning arcs. Caught by surprise, I turned in fear and drew close to my guide. And he, "Turn around! What are you doing? Look there! It is Ferianata rising from the flames. From the waist up, his shade will be made clear." My eyes were fixed on him already. Erect, he rose above the flame, great chest, great brow. He seemed to hold all hell in disrespect. My guide's prompt hands urged me among the dim and smoking sepulchres to that great figure, and said to me, "Mind how you speak to him." And when I stood alone at the foot of the tomb, the great soul stared almost contemptuously before he asked, "Of what line do you come?" Because I wished to obey, I did not hide anything from him, whereupon, as he listened, he raised his brows a little, then replied, "Bitter enemies were they to me, to my fathers, and to my party, so that twice I sent them scattering from high Italy." "If they were scattered, still from every part they formed again and returned both times," I answered. "But yours have not wholly learned that art." At this, another shade rose gradually, visible to the chin. It had raised itself, I think, upon its knees, and it looked around me as if it expected to find through that black air that blew about me another traveler. And weeping when it found no one there, turned back. "And if," it cried, "you travel through the dungeon of the blind by power of genius, where's my son? Why is he not with you?" And I to him, "Not by myself am I borne this terrible way. I am led by him who waits there, and whom perhaps your Guido held in scorn." For by his words and the manner of his torment, I knew his name already, and could, therefore, answer both what he asked and what he meant. Instantly, he rose to his full height. "He held? What is it you say? Is he dead, then? Do his eyes no longer fill with that sweet light?" And when he saw that I delayed a bit in answering his question, he fell backwards into the flame, and rose no more from it. But that majestic spirit, at whose call I had first paused there, did not change expression, nor so much as turn his face to watch him fall. "And if," going on from his last words, he said, "men of my line have yet to learn that art, that burns me deeper than this naming bed. But the face of her who reigns in hell shall not be 50 times rekindled in its course before you learn what griefs attend that art. And as you hope to find the world again, tell me, why is that populace so savage in the edicts they pronounce against my strain?" And I to him, "The havoc and the carnage that dyed the Arabia red at Monteperi have caused these angry cries in our assemblage." He sighed and shook his head. "I was not alone in that affair," he said. "Not certainly would I have joined the rest without good reason. But I was Alone at the time, every other consented to the death of Florence. I alone, with open face, defended her. Ah, so may your soul sometime have rest, I begged him. Solve the riddle that pursues me through this dark place and leaves my mind perplexed. You seem to see in advance of all time's intent, if I have heard and understood correctly, but you seem to lack knowledge of the present. We see a squint, like those whose twisted light can only make out the far off, he said, for the King of all still grants us that much light. When things draw near or happen, we perceive nothing of them. Except what others bring us, we have no news of those who are alive. So you may understand that all we know will be dead forever from that day and hour when the portal of the future is swung to. Then, as if stricken by regret, I said, Now, therefore, will you tell that fallen one who asked about his son that he is not dead? And that, if I did reply more quickly, it was because my mind was occupied with this confusion you have solved for me. And now my guide was calling me. In haste, therefore, I begged that mighty shade to name the others who lay with him in that chest. And he, more than 1,000 cram this tomb. The second Frederick is here, and the Cardinal of the Ubliandi. Of the rest, let us be dumb. And he disappeared without more said, and I turned back and made my way to the ancient poet, pondering the words of the dark prophecy. He moved along, and then, when we had started, he turned and said to me, What troubles you? Why do you look so vacant and downhearted? And I told him, and he replied, Well, may you bear those words in mind. Then, pausing, raising a finger, Now pay attention to what I tell you here. When finally you stand before the ray of that sweet lady whose bright eye sees all, from her you will learn the turnings of your way. So saying, he bore left, turning his back on the flaming walls, and we passed deeper yet into the city of pain, along a track that plunged down like a scar into a sink, which sickened us already with its stink.